What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 12, sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, NFL Week 12, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my Week 12 quarterback stud is Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing quarterbacks, but Patrick Mahomes has averaged 28 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.9 rush attempts per game. He scored 26, 34, and 40 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 27.3 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's 8,000 DraftKings salary and 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 56 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 3.5. So a super high scoring game here. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to put on a show versus Tom Brady. I love that low ownership, so I like Patrick Mahomes here versus Tampa Bay Bucks. Okay, my sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Tom Brady from the Tampa Bay Bucks playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a good defense overall, and they've been middle of the pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Tom Brady has averaged 21.5 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 1.7 rush attempts per game, and he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 18.8 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's 6,600 DraftKings salary and 1,300 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 56 points scored in this game, with the Tampa Bay Bucks trailing by 3.5. So you got a passing game script. Tom Brady is going to be on his A game versus Patrick Mahomes. So I like Tom Brady here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So of course, Dalvin Cook is a stud here, guys. He's got a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, but he's 9,500 DraftKings salary and 1,500 more on FanDuel. But he's a stud. He's a fantastic play here this week. But if you're looking to save some salary here, my Week 12 running back stud is Nick Chubb from the Cleveland Browns playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Nick Chubb has averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 16 rush attempts per game. He got 20 rush attempts last game, scored 14 fantasy points. He's going to be about 7% owned, projected at 14.9 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's 7,100 DraftKings salary and 1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Cleveland Browns favored by 6. So fantastic matchup and a running game script. So I like Nick Chubb here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, now this guy isn't really a sleeper pick. His ownership isn't really low enough to make him a sleeper pick, but you guys might be surprised by this name. My sleeper pick at the running back position is Nahim Heinz from the Indianapolis Colts playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Nahim Heinz has averaged 12.2 fantasy points per game on the season. He's only getting an average of 5.1 rush attempts per game and 4.5 pass targets per game, so he gets about 10 to 15 touches a game depending on the game script, and he's only going to be about 6% owned, projected at 11.6 fantasy points here in week 12, and he's only 4,600 DraftKings salary and 1,100 more on FanDuel. Now, Nahim Heinz, he's put up some monster games this year. He scored 29 fantasy points 2 weeks ago off of 12 rush attempts and 6 pass targets. So he's got some major upside at a low salary and relatively low ownership. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game, with the Colts favored by 3. So fantastic matchup, high scoring game, running game script. So I like Nahim Heinz here versus the Tennessee Titans.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My wide receiver stud is Stefan Diggs from the Buffalo Bills playing the Los Angeles Chargers, who have the 11th worst defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing wide receivers, Stefan Diggs has averaged 20 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10.1 pass targets per game. He scored 25, 24, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 11, 12, and 9 pass targets. He's going to be about 15% owned, projected at 18.2 fantasy points here in week 12. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary and 300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Buffalo Bills favored by 5. So high scoring game, just a ton of pass volume and consistent production. So I like Stefan Diggs here versus the LA Chargers. Okay, now I'm surprised at the low ownership of this player. My sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've been middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Tyler Boyd has averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.7 pass targets per game. He scored 18, 10, and 20 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 11, 8, and 7 pass targets. He's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 13.7 fantasy points here in week 12. He's only 5,000 DraftKings salary, and he's 1,900 more on FanDuel. So I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, and they have the Bengals trailing by 6. So you got a passing game script, ton of pass volume, excellent production, low ownership, low price tag. So I like Tyler Boyd here versus the New York Giants. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My week 12 tight end stud is Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller has averaged 14.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.3 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 90% of the snaps, and he's going to be about 24% owned, projected at 16 fantasy points here in week 12. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary and 1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 3. So fantastic matchup, high scoring game, close, competitive game. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, my sleeper pick at the tight end position is Mike Gesicki from the Miami Dolphins playing the New York Jets, who have the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Mike Gesicki has averaged 8.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.6 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 9.1 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's $4,300 DraftKings salary and $1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, with the Dolphins favored by 7. So fantastic matchup. He got 5 pass targets in each of the last 2 games, so pretty decent pass volume. I've been waiting for this guy to have a breakout game, and it could come here this week versus a bad defense. So I like Mike Gesicki here versus the New York Jets.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.